I'm French and I'm gonna tell you 14 things you shouldn't do if you're coming to France. The first one is spending all your time in Paris. And you know, I get it, Paris is amazing. I've been living here for a while. I agree that there's so many awesome things to do and you could just spend a lifetime exploring the city. However, a mistake I see people make is skipping the rest of France because they think it's gonna be just like Paris. And this mistake is totally understandable because most of the movies about France are also about Paris. You know, we've all watched Emily in Paris, not Emily in Marseille and Emily in Bordeaux. But if you're only visiting Paris and France, you are seriously missing out. And that's because each region of France has its strong original culture. So for example, myself, I grew up in Toulouse in the southwest of France. And when I go to Lille, for example, or to Brittany, I find the culture so different. Like they have different architecture, different food, and the local traditions are also different. And here I'll tell you all about my favorite places to visit in France in a bit. But one thing you need to know is depending on the type of trip you're planning, driving is not always the best way to get around France. So for example, if you're gonna hit up major cities like Paris, Bordeaux, Toulouse, which you absolutely should go to, well, these cities have a policy to keep cars outside of the city. So it's very hard to drive there. There's absolutely no parking space. There's a lot of traffic jams, one-way streets, and so on. It's not a place for cars. However, we do have great public transport, which is absolutely the best way to move around. Like, trust me, you do not want to drive in a big French city. Also, our train network is really amazing. Like for example, if I want to go to my hometown in Toulouse, I can take the bullet train that takes between 4 to 5 hours. The train from Paris to Lille only takes an hour and 15 minutes. And the bullet train to Marseille is 3 hours and 20 minutes. But one thing you might not know is that this also applies to smaller towns. Like we have a regional train network called TER, which is really awesome and gets you to very small towns that kind of are in the middle of nowhere. So in general, if you want to go somewhere, you should always check if there's a train station. I personally have never felt the need to rent a car when I'm vacationing in France, but I admit that you might need one if you choose to go in the deep countryside. Like for example, my parents spend a lot of time in Ariège, which is one of the most underrated and least densely populated regions of France. And while there are still buses over there, I personally wouldn't go there without a car. Also, driving is pretty different in France. If you're renting a random car, chances are you'll have to drive a manual car, which if you haven't done so before, it's quite a change from an automatic one. And also you have to be the king or queen of parallel parking. Like seriously, our parking spots are so tiny. It is so hard to park here in France. And obviously driving is not the only thing that's different in France. And another very common mistake people make is actually underestimating the cultural differences between France and their home country. Often France is one of the first countries that people visit when they go abroad. And I've talked a lot about it on the channel, but there's an idealized image that's mostly about Paris that comes from movies, and real life in France is not as aesthetic or romantic, obviously. And one thing that I find interesting and that often makes tourists clash a bit with locals is that touristy areas and local or business areas often are near each other and have to coexist. Like in another life, I was working a corporate job and I often had client meetings and their offices were right here on Champs-Élysées, which is one of the most famous avenues in Paris. And I have to say that it was a bit annoying because there were always so many people, and obviously those people were on vacation, so we didn't have exactly the same vibe. And you know, sometimes it feels that some people have a consumeristic approach to travel where they're just here to tick things off their list and then just leave, and they don't really take the time to appreciate or even respect the local culture. And you know, it is absolutely okay to not like cultural discovery or even adventure, but if you come to any foreign country, you will need to adapt at least a bit to the local culture. You'll also need to keep an open mind because if you expect things to be exactly like in your home country, it will lead to so much frustration. Otherwise, let me be honest with you, the only place where you can experience the beautiful French vibes without actually having to adapt to us and our culture is the French pavilion at Epcot at Disney. And this is no shade at all. I personally really like Disney World and Epcot, but it's the only place in the world where you'll find French people who actually cater to your every need. And that leads me to another big mistake people make when coming to France, is having this customer is king mentality. And I often have comments on my channel by people who feel this way, so I feel it's a point I really need to address. Like, for example, this person says, the French seem to make it perfectly clear that they don't like us, so I have absolutely no desire to travel to France and spend my hard-earned free time and money on their country. We also have this person who says, sorry, I'm not gonna spend my hard-earned money on a place that doesn't respect me. And this type of comments often comes from people who have the wrong expectations. In France and often in the rest of Europe, we have a different approach to the service industry. If you're used to American-style service where people are very smiley or asking you how you are at every point of your meal, you will be disappointed when you come to France. It's not that people don't like you or they don't respect you, it's just the attitudes toward what is good service actually changes from country to country. Like, I feel, for example, in France, we value more not being disturbed by the waiter than having someone who constantly asks you how you're doing. And also, we have a different approach to money in France. It's not because you paid for something that you have every right. And overall, I'd say that in France, money can't buy everything. And that's why if you want to complain to a business or to a service person, please do not yell or treat people like your servants. This doesn't work in France. It's actually very disrespectful. And you'll often find managers siding with the workers, and this might get you kicked out of the establishment. I've seen it happen. The right way to complain is to be polite and always treat the other person like a human being. This will get you so much further, both in France and in other countries. Also, really keep in mind that it's not personal. People are not personally trying to victimize you. Like, my boyfriend Bobby is American, he's very polite, always smiling, so he never gets in trouble with service people. Which leads me to my next mistake people make, which is accidentally being rude. Alright, I've made a full video breakdown about this one, but basically what's considered polite varies from country to country, and even if you have the best intentions, you might still be considered rude by French standards. And if you're a regular here, you know that I'm saying this in almost every video, but in France, being polite starts with saying hello or bonjour every time you start a new interaction. This is super important. It just means you're acknowledging the other person as a human being just like you. And if you don't do it, people will not be happy about it. Also, obviously, depending on where you are in France, people will be more or less friendly. I feel, for example, in Toulouse, people are more open to small talk. And if you go to the French countryside, people love to talk to each other. But another thing that will make your experience less frustrating in France is not thinking that you can get anything at any time. Alright, this one is really important, especially if you come from a culture that's really big on convenience. So for example, a lot of restaurants only open during the official French dining times, which are between 12 and 2 p.m. for lunch and starting at 7:30 p.m. for dinner. And often, if you come outside of those times, you'll either see the restaurant being fully closed or they might turn you down. Also, a lot of shops close on Sundays, especially outside of big cities. And there's also special holidays. Like, for example, a lot of bakeries like to take 1 month off in the summer because the owners need to relax a bit too. And obviously, you're probably aware that France is the land of strikes. It's almost a national pastime, so sometimes things will be closed and you have no control over it. And here, let me tell you, it's just something you need to accept. You cannot fight it, and I know it can be frustrating, but that's just how things are. And by the way, with shops not being open all the time, you're gonna want to make sure you don't forget anything when packing, because if you do, you won't always be able to pick it up at a local store. And one thing you definitely do not want to forget is an international travel adapter, because power outlets are different around the world. In the US, they look like this, and in France, they look like this. And that's where today's sponsor, Tessen's Universal Travel Adapter, comes in. Their adapter works with every main type of outlet, so you only need one adapter for all your travels. Also, with a regular adapter, you only get one outlet, so it's a bit complicated if you want to charge all your devices at once. With this adapter, you can charge everything because it has 2 USB-C and 2 USB-A ports. At the moment, Tessen has just announced a collaboration with musician Rachel Yagamata, themed What's Your Next Journey? So comment below with your next destination and click the link in the description to try Tessen's Universal Travel Adapter. One other mistake I see people make is staying on the tourist trail and only checking the main sites. I feel if you're doing this, you're massively missing out on the French culture. Obviously, if it's your first time in France and you've always dreamt of seeing Mont Saint-Michel or the French Riviera, by all means go for it. But know that there's so much more to France, and to generalize massively, I feel that you'll find culture, great food, beautiful old things, and nice landscapes pretty much everywhere in France. Instead of just hitting up the main sites, my advice to you is to think instead about what you like to do. Like, for example, if you like hiking, go to the Pyrenees or the Alps. If you like drinking wine, you're obviously in luck. Just think about your favorite French wines and just go there. So you could go to Champagne, to Bourgogne, to Bordeaux. Then I also feel there's so much culture and history in France, not only in the main cities like Paris, but also there's so many cool historical sites all around the country. A few of my favorite in the south of France are Carcassonne, and also the little village of Collioure, which inspired so many painters and is absolutely gorgeous. And speaking of villages, France has so many of them, and every year there's like an official ranking of the cutest villages of France. I personally really like the Lot region for that, but you just can't go wrong with this. Also, I often feel people just go to the same places on the French Riviera, but if you like going to the beach, there's so many other cooler places in my opinion. Like Biarritz, for example, is so beautiful, and you can also surf there because it's on the Atlantic Ocean. Although personally I just like watching people surf because I can't surf at all. There's also Brittany, which is super beautiful, and if you've been wanting to try sailing, that's really the place to do so. Also, I do feel the north and east of France are very underrated. Like Lille is such a fun and vibrant city, and you also have Strasbourg, which is very beautiful and has a very distinct culture. Obviously here I'm just scratching the surface, but especially if you're going out of the beaten path, do not make the next mistake and be impatient with people if they don't speak English perfectly. So first of all, although things are changing and more people can at least say a few words or have a basic conversation in English, a lot of people still don't speak English. And you know, that is to be expected. We are in France after all. Especially in smaller cities or villages, people have no reason to speak English. Like for example, around Toulouse, we have a lot of Spanish people and Spanish tourists, so a lot of people will speak a better Spanish than they speak English. Also, if you're a native English speaker, just know that sometimes your accent is too good, like people can't understand your accent. So speak slowly in simple terms to make sure you're being understood. But also, there's a lot of people who speak a very good English, so don't get offended if you start a conversation in French and then we switch to English. I do that all the time, and it's not because I think your French sucks, it's just because I'm more comfortable in English and I want to make the interaction easier. If you want to practice your French, just say so, and most of us will be happy to continue the conversation in French. But in any case, as long as you're polite, no one will be angry at you for not speaking French, or if you try to speak French and you're not very good at it. In general, most people will appreciate the effort. However, one thing that will make people angry is if you take photos or videos of people without their consent. Taking photos or videos of people without their consent is not only rude and a bit creepy, but it's also illegal in France. And here the rules are very simple. You obviously can take photos with people in it. Like let's say in this shot, I'm walking in the street. I haven't asked every single person for their authorization, and that's because I'm not singling them out. But if I were to take a photo or video of them, then that wouldn't be allowed. And in general, just don't take photos of people without their consent. Locals have a right to privacy and to just enjoy their lives. Another way you can get in trouble in France is if you get fined. And there are many ways you can get fined in France. The first one is in public transport. In public transport, you have to keep your ticket with you at all times. If you can't show you have a validated ticket, you'll get fined. So validate your ticket and keep it. And also in particular in Paris, there's different zones with different fares. So make sure you have the right ticket that corresponds to the zone you're going to. This is like that in a lot of big cities, and a lot of people think it is a scam, but it is not. You're just being controlled to see if you have a ticket. Do not freak out. You're not being victimized. I personally have gotten my ticket wrong in the past and was fined. It's like that for everyone. The other tickets you can get are speeding tickets. A lot of countries now have the automated speeding ticket machines. You can't really do anything about it, so just don't speed and use apps like Waze to make sure you know where the machines are. And another thing you should avoid doing is falling for tourist traps and scams. I've said it before, there's a lot of YouTube channels that really love to exaggerate on this and make people hyper aware and scared of coming to France. But I can promise you, French people are not out there to get you. And obviously, if you're in a big city like Paris, you should apply big city common sense, especially when you're near tourist sites or in the metro. Keep your valuables in closed pockets on your body and just don't look like you have anything to steal. I personally have only been pickpocketed once, and none of my friends who have visited Paris from abroad have either gotten pickpocketed or scammed, so I really feel this content is not really truthful and is exaggerated. Obviously, still read up about the most common scams, like the friendship bracelet or the clear cup guys, and just don't engage, that's all. However, France being a very touristy country, you sometimes encounter some tourist traps. And obviously, overpriced restaurants and souvenirs are not scams, they're just, not very good and a bit expensive. And in general, I recommend to never buy anything or go to the restaurant in touristy areas. But sometimes you just want to eat by the beach in the middle of August or grab a coffee with a view on a beautiful monument. And as long as you know that it's gonna be expensive, it's totally fine to do so. And this leads me to my next recommendation, which is to not come during the wrong time for you. In my opinion, I'd say there's only one wrong time to come to France, which is between the 15th of July to the 15th of August, because everyone is on vacation during this time, so cities will be empty and a bit lifeless, shops will be closed, and all the touristy areas will be super packed. Also, it's very hot and we often don't have AC. If you come during the summer months, be prepared to sweat a lot. If you still want to enjoy your summer weather and take a beach or hiking vacation, I'd recommend June or September. Things tend to be less crowded and also cheaper. Fall and spring tend to be pretty good in France, but if you come during winter, be prepared for a lot of rain in some places. Like, we usually don't have a lot of snow, but it rains constantly in some places. However, I love going to the south of France in winter, especially around the Mediterranean, because it's so sunny and the weather is just a tiny bit cold, but also very beautiful. In any case, don't make the next mistake and pack the wrong clothes. Here as well, I've made a full video about it, but here are my tips. Think about what you're planning to do, think about the weather, and dress accordingly. It's that simple. A lot of people tend to stress out about getting dressed for France, and that's again because of the Paris movies that portray us as a very stylish bunch that will also judge you. But the reality is that people do not really care about what you're wearing unless it's really inappropriate, like you're wearing a swimsuit to a religious site or flip-flops to a black tie event. But I feel that's just common sense. In any case, if you want to enjoy your trip to France, try to not do too much. I feel the French culture can be a bit complicated to understand at times, and the best way to do so is to really go with the flow of everyday life, see what other people are doing around you, and also follow what you like to do. So if your schedule is really packed, you're not gonna get to enjoy the French culture and all the moments that make it special, like having a good meal, taking a leisurely walk in our cute villages, or just hitting up a farmer's market. And by the way, if you're planning on hitting up Paris during your trip, I've made a full video about the things to not do when you're in Paris. And you'll see these are pretty different. So I recommend you click here and go watch it, and I'll see you there. Bye for now.